My wicked sister married an Arab millionaire, and he mysteriously died the day after the wedding. Finally, I'll have all his fortune to myself, she told my mother the night before. But they never imagined that the Arab millionaire had it all planned out, and really. Esmeralda was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone with trembling hands. She had just received the most baffling message of her life. Kareem, her brother-in-law, was dead. The night before, she had attended her sister Amanda's lavish wedding to Kareem, a dazzling event filled with jewels, laughter, and promises of a perfect life. Now, just a few hours later, he was gone. She felt her pulse pounding in her temples as she tried to understand what was happening. How could Kareem have died so suddenly? The last thing she remembered of him was his warm laughter, his bright eyes as he held Amanda's hand. But now it had all vanished, and the news had fallen like a heavy weight on her chest. She abruptly got out of bed. She needed answers, but more than that, she needed to talk to her sister. However, the very idea of facing Amanda, especially after the comments she had overheard her making to their mother the night before, sent a chill down her spine. Finally, I'll have all his fortune, Amanda had whispered with a smile that Esmeralda couldn't shake from her mind since she heard it. Esmeralda put on a light jacket and left her apartment, heading to Kareem's mansion, where Amanda was staying after the wedding. As the taxi drove through the city streets, her mind raced. Could it be possible that Amanda had something to do with Kareem's death? Was her sister involved in something darker than she had ever imagined? Though they had grown up together, Esmeralda had always felt that Amanda was more ambitious, always chasing luxury and power. Now, that ambition seemed to have crossed a dangerous line. When she arrived at the building, the doorman let her in without question, aware of the tragedy that had just occurred. She quickly took the elevator, her heart pounding with every floor it climbed. When she reached the mansion, Amanda was waiting for her, sitting on the large white sofa in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand. Her expression was calm, almost unbothered. "Esme, I knew you'd come," Amanda said in a soft voice, but one loaded with the coolness that always characterized her words in tense situations. "Amanda, what's going on?" Esmeralda asked, trying to stay calm. "They told me Kareem is dead. I can't understand it." Amanda gestured for her to sit beside her, as if they were about to have a casual sisterly chat. But Esmeralda couldn't ignore the coldness in her sister's eyes. "I know. It's horrible, isn't it?" Amanda took a sip of her wine, her dark eyes showing not a hint of pain. "But sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and you have to take advantage of what comes your way." Esmeralda felt a knot form in her stomach. That was not the response of a newlywed wife who had just lost her husband. "What are you saying, Amanda?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "He was your husband. You married him last night, and now you're talking about taking advantage of what comes next?" Amanda let out a small laugh, as if Esmeralda's words were childish to her. "Look, Esme, I'll be straight with you because you're my sister, and you deserve to know. Kareem and I, well, it wasn't a fairy tale. We got married because we both knew what the other had to offer. I needed stability, and he, well, I don't think I need to go into details. But yes, now he's dead, and that leaves me in a rather advantageous position. A position that, if I play my cards right, will allow me to have the life I've always dreamed of." Esmeralda looked at her in horror. What was her sister saying? Had she planned this all along? Her mind raced, trying to make sense of Amanda's cold and calculating words. "Amanda, do you hear what you're saying? Kareem just died, and you're talking as if this was part of a plan. How can you be so cold?" Amanda set the glass down on the glass table in front of them and leaned toward her sister with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't be naive, Esmeralda. This is real life, not a romantic movie. Kareem had money, and that's what matters now. I'm about to inherit his fortune, and that means our family will be more secure than ever. Mom understands that, which is why she's not here crying over him. You should understand it too. Esmeralda felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She had never believed Amanda was capable of something so heartless. She suddenly remembered the conversation between Amanda and their mother the night before, that whisper she had dismissed at the time, but that now cut through her like a dagger. Finally, I'll have all his fortune, Esmeralda murmured, almost without realizing. Amanda raised an eyebrow, but didn't flinch. Esme, don't be so dramatic. Kareem is dead, and yes, I'm going to inherit. I don't see why that's a problem. Esmeralda quickly stood up from the couch, feeling the anger rise in her body. She wanted to scream, but at the same time, something inside her told her she needed to be cautious. This isn't right, Amanda. Something isn't right about all of this, and you know it. You can't just take his money and act like nothing happened. Kareem he was a good man, and he deserves more respect than this. Amanda stood up as well, but with the same calmness she had shown the entire time. You can think whatever you want, Esme, but remember that this is all for our family. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices to ensure a better future. Esmeralda couldn't believe what she was hearing. She knew her sister was ambitious, but this was different. There was a darkness in her words that sent chills down her spine. However, she also understood that she couldn't confront her openly just yet. She needed proof, answers. I'm leaving, she said finally, her voice trembling. But don't think this is over. Amanda looked at her with a smile that seemed more like a challenge than a farewell. Do what you need to do, little sister. But I guarantee you won't find anything you don't want to see. Esmeralda walked out of the mansion feeling like her entire world had changed in a matter of hours. Kareem was dead, and her sister, the person she had once trusted, seemed to be involved in something much darker than she could have ever imagined. But she wasn't going to sit idly by. She knew she had to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the darkest side of her own family. Esmeralda walked quickly through the streets, feeling the cold afternoon wind hitting her face as her mind kept replaying the conversation with Amanda. It was impossible to get those carefully chosen words, that unsettling smile, out of her head. I'll finally get all her fortune. How could her own sister be so deeply involved in something so dark? With every step she took, the weight of suspicion about Amanda became more unbearable. When she arrived at her small apartment, she collapsed on the sofa, trying to breathe deeply to calm down. Around her, the faint city lights began to flicker through the windows, but nothing could take her mind off what she had just discovered. She knew there was more to it. Kareem hadn't just died. Amanda's words were far too suspicious. She looked at her phone, hesitating for a second, but finally dialed Samir, Kareem's cousin. She had met Samir at the wedding, a calm man with a gaze full of wisdom. If anyone could help her understand what was going on, it was him. Esmeralda, how are you? Samir asked when he answered, his tone kind, but with a hint of concern. Not very well, Samir, she replied with a sigh. I need to talk to you about Kareem. There are things that don't add up, things Amanda has said. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, as if Samir was processing her words. Let's meet at Alhambra Cafe in half an hour, he said finally, his tone more serious. Esmeralda hung up, grateful not to have to face this alone. She had many questions, and Samir seemed to be her only connection to the truth. Alhambra Cafe was filled with a warm golden light and the intoxicating aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Samir was already there when Esmeralda arrived, sitting at a table by the window, holding a cup of tea. His demeanor was calm, but his eyes revealed a concern that went beyond mourning. Esmeralda, he said, standing up to greet her. I'm glad you called. Thank you for coming, Samir. I didn't know who else to turn to, she said, sitting down across from him. Samir looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Tell me what's bothering you. Esmeralda took a deep breath and began to speak, telling him about Amanda's strange behavior, the words she had overheard the night before, and the coldness with which her sister spoke about Kareem's death. Every word she spoke made her own heart beat faster, as if saying it out loud made everything more real, more threatening. When she finished, Samir let out a long sigh, his gaze hardening. Kareem didn't talk much about Amanda, Samir admitted after a pause. He always described her as ambitious, but we never talked about her in depth. However, in the days leading up to the wedding, I noticed something was bothering him. He wasn't the type to show his worries easily, but there was a shadow in his words. Like something was weighing on his mind. Esmeralda looked at him intently, feeling the anxiety return. "Do you know if Kareem had enemies? Someone who might want to harm him?" she asked, her throat tight. Samir nodded slowly, taking a sip of tea before answering. In business, Kareem was always brilliant, but he also played in dangerous leagues. His companies had connections in various parts of the world, including some countries where deals aren't always clear or legal. I don't want to speculate without proof, but I can't rule out that someone wanted to hurt him. Samir's words echoed in Esmeralda's mind. If Kareem had enemies and Amanda knew, could she have used that to her advantage? Or had she simply taken advantage of the situation? The idea that her own sister could be involved in something so dark made her sick. "Samir, I think Amanda is involved in this," Esmeralda finally said, her voice trembling. "I can't prove it, but everything she said, her attitude. I don't think Kareem died by accident." Samir watched her in silence for a moment, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and understanding. "You're not alone in this, Esmeralda. If Amanda is involved, we'll find out. Kareem deserves justice, and I'm willing to get to the bottom of this, even if it means facing things we don't want to see." The determination in Samir's voice comforted her. For the first time since Kareem's death, she felt like she wasn't completely lost. She knew there was a long road ahead, but she wouldn't walk it alone. "Thank you, Samir," she murmured, looking at him sincerely. "I don't know what I would do without your help." Samir gave her a small smile. "You don't have to thank me. Kareem was my cousin, but he was also like a brother to me. If there's something shady about his death, we'll find out, together." That same night, Esmeralda returned to her apartment with a feeling of relief mixed with growing unease. She knew that confronting Amanda and discovering the truth wouldn't be easy. But now, with Samir's help, she felt she had the tools to do it. As she checked her email before bed, she noticed a message she wasn't expecting, an email from an anonymous sender. The subject read, "To protect the fortune, sometimes you have to sacrifice everything." Esmeralda felt a chill run down her spine as she opened the email. It contained nothing more than that sentence, but it was enough to make it clear that someone else knew what was going on. Was it a warning? A threat? Her mind started spinning again, with more questions than answers. She knew she couldn't trust anyone but Samir, and that Amanda was surely already moving her own pieces in this dangerous game. Determined not to be intimidated, Esmeralda saved the message in her evidence folder. If someone was behind Kareem's death, they were now after her too. The next morning, Esmeralda received an unexpected call. It was her mother. Her tone, as always, was distant, but there was a tension in her voice that Esmeralda couldn't ignore. "Esmeralda, dear, we need to talk. I've heard you've been asking questions about Kareem." Her mother paused. "There are things you don't understand, things you need to let go of." Esmeralda clenched her teeth, feeling anger and sadness bloom inside her. "Why, Mom? Why should I let everything go? Kareem is dead, and something isn't right about all of this. Amanda is involved, can't you see?" There was a long silence on the line before her mother responded. "Amanda has always known what's best for this family. Don't get involved in matters you don't understand, Esmeralda. I'm warning you for your own good." Esmeralda felt a pang in her chest. Her own mother was telling her to step aside. Something very dark was going on, something that may have started long before Kareem's death. "I'm not going to stay quiet, Mom. If there's something I need to know, "I'll find out," she replied firmly before hanging up. She knew her decision put her at the center of a web of lies, ambition, and danger, but she also knew she couldn't turn back. Kareem's death wouldn't be in vain. Later that day, Esmeralda was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of her, buzzing insistently. Since her mother's call that morning, she hadn't been able to stop thinking about the veiled warning she had given her. "Amanda has always known what's best for this family," she had said. But those words didn't reassure her, quite the opposite. She knew her mother was not oblivious to the secrets surrounding Kareem, and she was probably protecting Amanda. The question was, from what? A message arrived at that moment, interrupting her thoughts. It was from Samir. "We're meeting at the lawyer's office at 3. There's something important we need to discuss." The clock showed 2:15. She didn't have much time. Without wasting another minute, she stood up and left her apartment, her mind still tangled in all the questions she couldn't answer. As she walked toward the taxi station, a sense of urgency began to grow in her chest. She knew that whatever Samir had discovered would change everything, but she was also afraid of what it meant. Kareem's lawyer's office was in an elegant building downtown, with huge windows that let in light and dark wood furniture that gave an air of seriousness. Upon arriving, Esmeralda saw Samir waiting with a professional-looking man, probably the lawyer. Samir approached her immediately, his face grave. "Thank you for coming, Esmeralda," he said, gesturing for her to sit in a chair in front of the lawyer's desk. "There's something you need to know. Something Kareem left prepared, but he didn't get the chance to tell you before." He paused, his voice heavy with emotion, "before his death." Esmeralda nodded, her heart pounding. She wasn't ready for what was coming, but she knew she had to face it. The lawyer, a man in his 50s with glasses and graying hair, spoke up. Kareem was a meticulous man, forward-thinking. He knew that, due to his business dealings, he could be in danger at any time. Days before his wedding, he sent us instructions to draft a new will, more detailed than the previous one. In it, he clearly specified how he wanted his fortune to be distributed in the event of his death. Samir looked at Esmeralda, his eyes serious. "What Kareem left behind is more than just money, Esmeralda. There's information, evidence about the businesses that Amanda and your mother have been secretly managing, even long before he died." Esmeralda felt as if the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. The words, businesses, and evidence hit her like a cold wave. Her mother and Amanda had been involved in something dark for a long time, and Kareem had somehow found out. "But why didn't he tell me anything?" she asked, her voice breaking. If he knew he was in danger, why didn't he warn me?" Samir leaned toward her, his tone soft but firm. "I'm not sure how much he knew. Kareem wasn't the type of man to act without having all the information. I think, deep down, he trusted that Amanda wouldn't betray him, at least not so soon. But he left this evidence in case something happened." The lawyer slid a thick envelope toward Esmeralda. Inside were a series of documents, bank statements, transaction copies, and what appeared to be an agreement signed between Amanda and several shady figures in international business. What Kareem had uncovered was shocking. Amanda and her mother were involved with a criminal group that was laundering money through Kareem's businesses. He had never been aware of it until it was too late. Esmeralda, her hands trembling, flipped through the papers, incredulous at what she was reading. This can't be real," she murmured. "My mother, Amanda. I always knew they were ambitious, but this is madness." Samir looked at her with a mix of sadness and understanding. "It's real, Esmeralda. Kareem discovered it shortly before the wedding. He was looking for a way out, but he didn't have time. Now, everything is in your hands." Samir's words were as heavy as the air in the room. Now, everything depended on her. She had the evidence to expose what Amanda and her mother had been doing, but she also knew that it meant destroying her own family. Was she prepared for that? "I can't believe this," Esmeralda let the papers fall onto the table, feeling overwhelmed. Amanda killed Kareem, didn't she? It couldn't have been a coincidence that he died right after the wedding. Samir nodded slowly. That's what it seems. But we need more evidence. This is enough to start an investigation, but not to accuse her directly. Kareem knew his life was in danger. That's why he did this. Now we have to be cautious. Esmeralda took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the weight of betrayal was too heavy. Everything she had believed about her family was falling apart, and now she faced the difficult decision of exposing the truth or staying silent to protect what was left of her world. And what happens if we do nothing? She finally asked, her voice trembling. The lawyer intervened, his tone professional but severe. If we do nothing, Amanda and your mother will continue with their illegal activities. Kareem's death will likely be buried as a tragedy, and eventually, they'll take over his fortune and keep operating in the shadows. There will be no justice for Kareem, nor for the victims of the transactions they're involved in. Esmeralda closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision before her. The silence in the room was overwhelming. She knew that no matter what path she chose, nothing would ever be the same. But she also knew that Kareem didn't deserve to die in vain. Someone had to pay for what happened, and that responsibility now fell on her. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice firm. I'll bring it all to light. Samir looked at her with a mix of relief and respect. You're not alone in this, Esmeralda. I'll help you with whatever you need. This won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. Esmeralda nodded. Though she was terrified of what was to come, she knew she couldn't back down. The truth had to be told, no matter the cost. That night, as Esmeralda returned home, she felt the weight of the past few days finally catching up to her. Her sister, her own mother, how could they have fallen so low? Memories of her childhood flashed through her mind. The laughter, the family dinners. But those moments now seemed distant, almost unreal, as if they belonged to another life. When she arrived at her apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, exhausted both physically and emotionally. As she looked at the envelope still in her hands, she knew that the next step would be the hardest. She would have to confront Amanda, and maybe her mother too, with what she knew. But it wouldn't be today. Today, she just needed to process what she had discovered, to come to terms with the fact that her life, as she knew it, had changed forever. Tomorrow would be the day when everything truly started to unravel. And though fear gripped her, she also knew she had to be brave. Kareem deserved justice, and she would give it to him, even if it meant dismantling her own family. The next morning, Esmeralda woke up early, but she didn't feel rested. The night before, she had barely slept. The images of the meeting with Samir and the documents she had discovered about her family had kept her awake, and although she had decided to reveal the truth, fear still clung to her. As the sun began to light up the small apartment, she knew that today was the day to confront Amanda. The day when, for the first time, her family would be torn apart. After preparing a cup of coffee that she could barely taste, she dressed in comfortable but formal clothes. She needed to feel strong, even though inside, she was in turmoil. When she stepped out of her apartment, the cold air hit her face, as if warning her that the day would bring more than she could foresee. She headed toward Kareem's mansion, where Amanda still lived, enjoying the luxurious home that had once belonged to her husband. When she arrived at the building, the doorman let her in without asking any questions. She took the elevator to the top floor, her heart racing with every passing level. The silence inside the elevator was deafening, but her mind was filled with voices, the questions she needed to ask Amanda, the memories of their childhood together, and most of all, the echo of the cold words Amanda had spoken to her after Kareem's death. When the door to the mansion opened, Amanda was waiting, impeccably dressed as always, with a fake smile that Esmeralda now knew all too well. Esmeralda, I'm surprised to see you so early. Amanda crossed her arms, leaning against the door frame. What brings you here? Esmeralda didn't smile. There was no room for smiles. She crossed the threshold and made her way to the living room, where the giant windows showed the city sprawling before them. The opulence of the place contrasted with the darkness Esmeralda knew it concealed. We need to talk, Amanda said Esmeralda, her voice firm, though inside she was trembling. Amanda raised an eyebrow, following her with a casual step. About what? If it's about Kareem, I already told you it was a tragedy. I don't see why you keep stirring up the past. Her tone was sarcastic, but the unease in her eyes didn't go unnoticed by Esmeralda. Esmeralda turned sharply, facing her sister. She took a deep breath before speaking, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything between them. I know what you've done, Amanda, Esmeralda said bluntly. Kareem knew what you were up to. I have proof. You and Mom have been involved in a legal business for years, and Kareem found out before they killed him. Amanda's smile vanished in an instant. Her face hardened, and for a few moments, she said nothing. The silence was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Proof? Amanda asked, her voice lower, as if trying to contain her anger. What proof? Documents, transactions, your signatures, and Mom's. Kareem kept everything. He knew you were involved in something, and now it's all coming to light. Esmeralda took a step toward her sister, feeling the weight of the words she was saying. I won't let you get away with it. Kareem doesn't deserve for his death to go unpunished. Amanda stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, she let out a cold laugh, devoid of any warmth. And what are you going to do, Esmeralda? Go to the police? She crossed her arms, walking slowly around the room as if she had nothing to fear. Are you going to destroy Mom too? Destroy the only family you have for a man who, deep down, didn't even matter to you? Esmeralda felt a knot in her stomach. Amanda's words were like daggers. Of course Kareem mattered to her. But Amanda, as always, knew how to manipulate her emotions, how to make her doubt. Don't try to manipulate me, Amanda, Esmeralda said, trying to keep calm. It's not just about Kareem. It's about what you and Mom have been doing for years. I can't stay silent while you destroy other people's lives just for your own greed. Amanda stepped closer, her dark eyes glowing with restrained fury. You've always been so naive, Esme, she whispered. This world isn't for the weak. Kareem was a hindrance, and his businesses were dragging us down. If I hadn't married him, our family would have fallen long ago. Mom and I did everything for you too, even if you don't see it. You've always been the favorite, the untouchable. And now you come to accuse me? Amanda's words made Esmeralda take a step back. She had never seen so much coldness in her sister, so much unbridled ambition. Silence fell again, but this time, it was charged with electricity, as if everything was about to explode. I'm going to the police, said Esmeralda finally, feeling a pain in her chest as she said it. I can't keep being a part of this. Amanda looked at her with a twisted smile, as if she had expected those exact words. Do it, she whispered. But I assure you, you won't come out unscathed. Mom is prepared for everything. You'll be the one who loses everything, Esmeralda. Not us. Fear settled in Esmeralda's chest like a heavy weight. She knew Amanda wasn't lying. Her mother had always been a calculating woman, and she had surely taken precautions to protect herself. Even so, Esmeralda knew she couldn't stop. She had made a decision, and now she had to face it. We'll see, Amanda, she said in a low but firm voice. We'll see each other in court. That afternoon, Esmeralda went to the police station. The atmosphere there was grim, and as she waited to be seen, her mind replayed Amanda's face, that cruel and confident smile telling her this wouldn't be easy. When it was her turn, a serious-looking detective attended to her. She handed over the documents, explaining everything with a racing heart, knowing that with every word she spoke, her family was breaking apart a little more. The detective nodded slowly as he reviewed the papers. "We'll start a formal investigation," he said. "But you need to understand that this will take time. The people you're accusing are not just anyone. It's going to be a complicated process, and there will be repercussions." "I know," Esmeralda replied, feeling the weight of the situation. "I just want justice. I can't stay silent." The detective watched her for a moment before responding. "What you're doing is brave, but it's also dangerous. Make sure you're ready for what's coming." Esmeralda nodded. She knew the path she had chosen would be long and painful. She knew her family wouldn't make things easy, but she also knew there was no turning back. Kareem's death, the lies, the manipulation, all of it had to come to light. When she returned to her apartment that night, exhausted and emotionally drained, she sat on her bed, looking out the window at the lit-up city. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had done the right thing, though she knew the price would be high. Her mother and Amanda weren't going to stop without a fight, but neither was she. She closed her eyes, feeling the calm before the storm. She knew her life was about to change forever, but she also knew she was ready for whatever came. The truth had a price, and Esmeralda was willing to pay it. Esmeralda was sitting on her couch, staring out the window as the rain fell over the city. The water droplets formed little races on the glass, but she barely noticed them. The detective's words still echoed in her head. It's going to be a complicated process, and there will be repercussions. She knew she had taken a decisive step, one that had lit a fuse that couldn't be extinguished. The feeling of relief after her report at the police station had been fleeting, and now the fear of what was to come set in. The sound of her phone interrupted her thoughts. It was Samir. Since she had revealed Amanda and her mother's secrets, Samir had been her most constant support. However, today his voice on the other end of the line sounded different, darker. "Esmeralda, we need to talk." "Something happened," he said, his tone grave. Esmeralda felt a shadow of fear creep down her spine. "What happened?" she asked, trying to stay calm. "I received an anonymous message. It seems someone else knows what you're doing. They know you handed the documents over to the police," Samir responded. "I need you to come to my office. This is bigger than we imagined." Esmeralda felt her stomach churn, but she knew she couldn't let panic take over. She thanked Samir and hung up, hurrying to get dressed. The anonymous message wasn't just a warning, it was a sign that someone more powerful and more dangerous was watching. Now, the situation wasn't just about Amanda and her mother. There was something else, something pulling the strings from the shadows. When she arrived at Samir's office, Esmeralda's anxiety grew. The rain had stopped, but the humidity in the air made everything feel heavier. Samir stood by the window in his office, looking out at the horizon, but turned when he heard Esmeralda's footsteps. His expression said it all. There was something darker at play. "What's really going on, Samir?" Esmeralda asked, her voice trembling but determined. "What don't we know?" Samir showed her his phone. On the screen was a message that read, "We know what she did. Stay out of it if you want to stay safe." "It's not just a warning, Esmeralda. It's a threat," Samir said, his tone serious. "These people don't play games. They have connections in places we can't reach. If you keep going with this, you could be in danger." Esmeralda felt panic begin to rise in her, but also a growing determination. She knew this was the kind of battle Kareem had tried to avoid, but now there was no turning back. "We can't stop now, Samir. This isn't just about my safety. It's about what they did to Kareem. If we stop, they win. Amanda and my mother, they're tangled up in something bigger. Maybe they're not even the ones controlling it all," she said, trying to organize her thoughts. Samir nodded, though his face showed concern. "I know, but we need to be more careful. We can't do this alone. If Amanda and your mother are connected to this criminal group, we need more support. People who know how to take them on." Esmeralda looked at him, trying to stay calm as the fear continued to gnaw at her from within. "What do you suggest?" she asked. Samir walked over to his desk and pulled out a folder full of documents. I have contacts in the Emirates. People who were close to Karim and suspected something was wrong before his death. They can help us track down these people, the ones behind all of this. But I'm warning you, Esmeralda, once we step into this world, there's no turning back. Esmeralda looked at the papers, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. She knew Samir was right. The enemy they were facing wasn't small, and their threats were already starting to materialize. However, the truth about Karim's death remained her driving force. She couldn't let his life be taken without justice. "We'll do it," she finally said, her voice firm. "No matter what it costs. We're going to uncover the truth." Days later, Esmeralda found herself in a meeting with Samir's contacts. They were a diverse group, some men and women who had worked with Karim on different aspects of his business in the Emirates. One of them, a man named Rashid, had been a close friend of Karim and had deep knowledge of his operations. His voice was calm, but his words carried a weight that Esmeralda couldn't ignore. Karim knew there were risks, but he never thought his own wife was involved. As the months went by, he noticed something wasn't right with his finances. Money movements he hadn't authorized, shell companies. When he started digging deeper, he received threats. "The last thing he told me was that he suspected Amanda was more involved than it seemed." "He didn't have time to do anything about it," Rashid said, looking at Samir and Esmeralda. "But all of this points to a larger network. Amanda and your mother are just pieces." Esmeralda felt a chill run through her body as she heard those words. She knew Amanda was ambitious, but she had never imagined she was just a pawn in something much larger. She realized that now they weren't just facing her family, but something far more dangerous. Powerful people connected to the shadows of financial crime and who knows what else. "So, someone else is pulling the strings?" Samir asked, his brow furrowed. Rashid nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's the most dangerous part. These people don't have faces. They use others to do their dirty work, and when someone becomes a problem, they get rid of them." Karim was close to uncovering everything, and that's why he was silenced. Esmeralda felt a lump in her throat. Rashid's words confirmed what she had feared. Karim hadn't just been a victim of Amanda's greed. He had been murdered by something much bigger, and now she was fully immersed in that storm. "So, what do we do now?" Esmeralda asked, her voice filled with resolve. Rashid looked at her with a mix of respect and concern. "We gather more evidence that can't be ignored. Then we take this to a higher authority. It won't be easy, Esmeralda. If we keep going, they'll know and they'll come after us. But if we do this right, we can expose them all." Esmeralda nodded, knowing there was no turning back. She had decided to move forward, and she would do so until the end. For Karim. For the truth. That night, as she returned to her apartment, Esmeralda sat by the window once again, staring at the city lights. The weight of what she was about to face was overwhelming, but she also felt a strange calm. She knew she was in danger, that what was coming would be even more complicated and painful, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Samir, Rashid, and the people close to Karim were with her, and together, they were going to uncover the truth. She looked at her phone, knowing the threats would keep coming, but she no longer feared the invisible enemy. Now, she had the weapons to fight, and she was determined to do so. The path to justice would be long and full of shadows, but Esmeralda was ready to face it all. Finally, she felt like she was fighting for something bigger than herself. And that gave her the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what happened next. The next morning, Esmeralda woke up with the echo of her thoughts reverberating in her mind, the weight of the truth she had discovered about her family keeping her in a constant state of alert. Despite everything she had learned, there was something even deeper that troubled her, knowing that not only her sister Amanda, but also her own mother, were complicit in something as dark as what had destroyed Karim's life. The dawn had barely begun to light up the sky, but Esmeralda was already up, determined. She knew today would be crucial. Alongside Samir and Rashid, they had gathered the necessary evidence to involve more people in the investigation. Now, they needed to present that evidence to a higher authority and do so without alerting those behind Amanda's and her mother's actions. It was a dangerous move, but a necessary one. The web Karim had begun to unravel before his death was about to be exposed. However, there was one last conversation she needed to have before moving forward. She knew her mother wouldn't stay quiet for long, and if things were going to fall apart, she preferred to face it head-on. She couldn't bear the idea that her own mother was involved in something so terrible. She picked up the phone, knowing that with every word she said, she would be risking not only her family relationships, but also her own safety. She dialed her mother's number and waited. Esmeralda, her mother's voice sounded cold on the other end of the line, as if she already knew what was coming. "We need to talk, Mom." "And I can't wait any longer," Esmeralda replied, trying to stay calm. Her mother didn't respond immediately, and for a few seconds, the silence between them was unbearable. "Come home, Esmeralda. We'll talk here," she finally said, and hung up without waiting for a reply. Esmeralda took a deep breath. She knew this conversation would be decisive, marking the beginning of the end. The house where she had grown up was full of memories, but now it felt like a strange place to her. Upon entering, everything seemed cold and unfamiliar, as if the years of laughter and shared moments had vanished into thin air. Her mother was waiting for her in the living room, with tea served on the table, but her face showed no trace of the warmth Esmeralda remembered from her childhood. Amanda wasn't there, which only heightened the tension. "What do you need to tell me?" her mother asked, without beating around the bush, as she gestured for her to sit. Esmeralda watched her for a moment, trying to find any hint of remorse or guilt in her eyes, but found nothing. She knew her mother had always been strong, even ruthless at times, but now she seemed like someone else, someone who had been able to justify the unjustifiable. "I know what you and Amanda have been doing," Esmeralda said, without hesitation. "I know that Karim discovered your dealings and that you tried to cover everything up before his death. But I'm not going to let you get away with it. I've already handed the evidence over to the police." Her mother didn't show any surprise, not even a sign of concern. Instead, she calmly took a sip of her tea, as if Esmeralda hadn't said anything out of the ordinary. "I knew you'd do this," she finally responded. "You've always been the one inclined toward justice, the one who couldn't see the world for what it really is." "For what it really is," Esmeralda replied, her voice rising slightly. "Is this what you think life is? Lying, stealing, destroying other people's lives? Karim is dead, Mom." Her mother's expression didn't change, but her voice became more severe. "Karim was an obstacle. Amanda understood that long before you did. Everything we've done has been to protect this family, Esmeralda. You can't understand it now, but someday you will. You can't survive in this world by just being good. You have to be strong. You have to take what's ours. And Karim, well, he got in the way of our plans." Esmeralda felt a chill run down her spine. The level of coldness and detachment with which her mother spoke of Karim's death left her breathless. Everything she had ever believed about her family was crumbling at that moment. "Is that what you're going to tell the police?" Esmeralda asked, her voice trembling. "That all of this was a sacrifice for our family?" Her mother gave a faint smile. "You won't have the chance to take me to the police, Esmeralda. You don't understand how deep this goes. Amanda and I aren't alone. You've gotten yourself into a world you can't control, and if you keep going, they'll destroy you." Esmeralda's fear grew stronger. She knew her mother was involved with powerful people, but until that moment, she hadn't realized the magnitude of what that meant. However, the warning only reinforced her decision. Karim had tried to stop all of this before he was killed, and she wasn't going to let his death go without justice. She stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on her mother. "It doesn't matter how deep you think you are in this, Mom. I won't stop. Amanda won't get away with it, and neither will you." Without waiting for a response, Esmeralda turned and left the house. As she closed the door behind her, she felt the cold air hit her face, but also a sense of relief. She had faced her mother, and though she knew the road ahead would be dangerous, she also knew she had done the right thing. Samir was waiting for her at the police station when she arrived. The tension in the air was palpable, but he greeted her with a supportive look. "How did it go?" he asked, noticing the tired expression on Esmeralda's face. "Worse than I imagined," she replied. Mom didn't show an ounce of remorse. She knows they're being investigated, but she doesn't seem worried. She's convinced we can't stop them. Samir nodded, understanding what that meant. "But we will. You're not alone in this, Esmeralda. We have the evidence, and now the authorities are involved." What they thought was unshakable is about to crumble. Esmeralda looked at him, grateful for his support. Over the past few months, Samir had been her anchor in the storm, and although she knew what was coming would be dangerous, she also knew that together they could face it. That night, as she prepared for bed, Esmeralda received a message on her phone. When she opened it, her heart stopped for a moment. It was another anonymous message. "You can't stop us. Stop before it's too late." Esmeralda felt fear settle in her chest again, but also a firm resolve. She knew that now, more than ever, she couldn't stop. The threats only pushed her to keep going. She couldn't let fear paralyze her, not when she was so close to uncovering the whole truth. She closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of calm. She knew the days ahead would be even darker, but she was ready to face them. For Kareem, for justice, and for herself. The wind blew strong that morning as Esmeralda walked towards Samir's office. She knew the day had come. She had spent weeks gathering evidence, facing threats from her mother and Amanda, pushing through her own fear to bring the truth about Kareem's death to light. But now everything was about to explode. The pieces had aligned, and the fate of her family, and possibly her own life, would be decided today. Samir was waiting for her in front of the building, his face reflecting the same mix of concern and determination that Esmeralda felt inside. "Esmeralda, are you ready for this?" he asked, his eyes locked on hers. "I don't have a choice," she replied, though the truth was that fear still lingered in her chest. Kareem deserves nothing less than the truth. And I'm not going to let Amanda or my mother get away with it. Samir nodded, and together they entered the building. Inside, Rashid was already waiting, accompanied by the lawyers and detectives who had been working on the case. It was a small group, but they all shared the same goal, to seek justice for Kareem. The plan was in motion. Amanda and her mother had no idea that the evidence would be presented to a judge today, who, thanks to Samir's connections, had agreed to review the evidence immediately. The financial transactions, illegal agreements, and testimonies from those who had worked with Kareem were all carefully prepared to tear down the facade Amanda and her mother had maintained for years. But before they could take the next step, Esmeralda received an unexpected call. "It's Amanda," she said, looking at the screen of her phone. The silence in the room became heavy, and Samir watched her cautiously. "Answer it," he said. "This might be part of the endgame." Esmeralda took a deep breath and answered. "What do you want, Amanda?" Amanda's voice on the other end sounded different from her usual coldness, as if the tension had finally started to catch up with her. "Esme, please listen to me. I know you're with Samir, and you think you can stop me, but you don't understand what's at stake here. It's not just us. There are powerful people involved. If you keep going, they'll destroy you. They'll destroy all of us." Her voice was filled with a fear Esmeralda had never heard before. "Mom told me what you did, and now everything is out of control." Esmeralda felt a knot in her stomach, but her response was firm. "Amanda, this isn't just about you or Mom anymore. Kareem is dead, and his death can't go unpunished. I can't live knowing what you've done, and I can't ignore everything you've kept from me. You had chances to stop, but you chose to keep going. There was a long silence on the other end before Amanda spoke again, this time in a whisper. I'm sorry, Esme. There's no turning back for me, but maybe there is for you. Before Esmeralda could respond, the line went dead. Something about Amanda's words deeply disturbed her. That wasn't an apology, it was a warning, but also a farewell. Samir watched her closely, and seeing the confusion on Esmeralda's face, he approached. What happened? Amanda. I think she's more scared than she's been letting on. She knows all of this is about to collapse, but she spoke as if Esmeralda paused, trying to process what had just happened, as if she was planning something else. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The evidence was presented to the judge, who was shocked by the depth of the corruption and crimes Amanda and her mother had carried out with their partners. The police were mobilized immediately, and within minutes, authorities were on their way to arrest both women. However, Esmeralda's heart was still uneasy. She knew Amanda wasn't the type to surrender without a fight. Something about her last words didn't sit right, and that feeling gnawed at her as they waited for the outcome. When the police arrived at the penthouse where Amanda and her mother were, the situation took an unexpected turn. Instead of arresting them right away, they found a strange scene. Amanda was gone. The house was in disarray, but there were no signs of a struggle, just papers scattered and torn documents on the floor. Her mother was sitting on the sofa, in a state of shock. Esmeralda arrived shortly after with Samir and Rashid, and as she entered the place, the tension in the air almost suffocated her. Where's Amanda? She asked, looking at her mother, who remained silent. Finally, her mother raised her head, her eyes empty, and her voice broken. She's gone. She knew she couldn't escape all of this. She left a letter for you. Esmeralda took the letter her mother handed her with trembling hands. As she opened it, she read Amanda's final words. Esme, I've done unforgivable things, but I can't keep running. Mom and I created this monster, and now there's no way to undo it. I've left everything in your hands because, in the end, you were always better than us. We never deserved your kindness. Forgive me, though I know you can't. I'm leaving, but I'm not hiding. You'll face many enemies now, but I know you'll be stronger than them. Esmeralda dropped the letter. She felt a mix of sadness and relief, but most of all, a sharp pain for what her family had become. She knew she would never be the same after everything she had discovered, but she also knew that finally, the truth had come to light. Days later, Amanda was found in a small town far from the city. She surrendered to the authorities without resistance. She knew her end had come, and though her life had been marked by her crimes, she had accepted that she would pay for what she had done. Esmeralda visited her in jail before the trial began. Amanda, for the first time in a long while, seemed like a completely different person. She had lost the coldness that had always defined her. I never wanted it all to end this way, Amanda said, her voice hollow. Esmeralda looked at her with sadness, but also with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. I know, Amanda. But now we have to live with what we've done. And I have to move on. As they said their goodbyes, Esmeralda felt that she could finally close that chapter of her life. She had faced her family's demons, discovered the truth about Kareem's death, and though the journey had been painful, it had also set her free. Standing outside the prison, feeling the sun on her face, she knew that now, finally, she was ready to start anew. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment on how it made you feel, and if you've been through a similar situation of betrayal, I'd love for you to share your thoughts. I'd be honored if you leave a like, share the video with a friend or family member, and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss the next surprising story appearing on your screen right now. We've got guaranteed entertainment exclusively for you. See you in the next video.